Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Passions raged in the expensive and posh mansion. Kathy's 20-year-old daughter was at war with her own father, a renowned medical luminary and respected surgeon. "Dad, what do you mean I need to get married right away?" "Who does? Me or you? I don't get it. You've been trying to control me all my life. You won't let me breathe. There are only babysitters and guards around. I'm not a child anymore, and I can decide for myself whether it's time for me to get married or not. And I will choose as my husband someone whom I really love in my heart." But Frank was adamant and stood his ground. "Why are you raising your voice to your father? You're losing your temper. Have I ever wished or done anything wrong to you? You always get the best of everything, thanks to my efforts, and I know better who you should tie your fate to. Look at Sam, a very promising young man. His father is a famous deputy. He's only 20 and his father has already given him a fancy car and an apartment. Surely he will find a warm place for his son. You will live and not need anything." Kathy flared up even more. "Never. I can't stand that pompous braggart who burns through my father's money left and right. And who is he? A zero without a stick." Frank parried. "He's still young. He hasn't found himself. But I support you completely, don't I? I provide for you. I buy you everything. You also drive a nice car and wear brand-name clothes." Kathy almost screamed. "Exactly, and I'm the same way. And I don't want to be like that. Let me live my own life, not yours. I want to achieve something myself, fall in love, do what I want, do what I like. But you just don't hear me." The girl ran to her room in tears and collapsed on her bed. She took in her hands the portrait of her mother, which always stood on her nightstand, and pressed it to her, whispering, "Mommy, why aren't you with me? You would understand me." "Daddy does not want to understand me at all. He is oppressing me again. Why is he like that? His love suffocates me. I can't take it anymore." Kathy began to look at her deceased mother's face, closed her eyes, and felt her warm, soft hands, her quiet and affectionate voice, and soft smile. Kathy's mother died a long time ago, when she started first grade. It was sudden and ridiculous. The woman caught a common cold, got wet in the rain, and got sick. She didn't go to the doctor for a long time, all treated at home. But her condition worsened, and when they did take her to the hospital, they found she had advanced pneumonia, and she died suddenly, burning up in a couple of days. Kathy missed her mother terribly. She cried. Nothing pleased her. Her father went into work, became rich, and opened his own clinic. He was already the leading surgeon at the time, and people were booking him in months in advance. For his beloved and only daughter, the man spared neither money nor effort, hiring the best tutors and nannies, buying only the highest quality and most expensive gadgets and toys, taking her to the best resorts, but at the same time supervising absolutely every step of the child. This always irritated Kathy terribly, because she could not just run with the kids from the yard, go with them to the river to swim or ride a bike. She was always being followed first by babysitters and then by an invisible chauffeur who seemed to manage to be everywhere. Kathy more than once escaped from his watchful eye, for which she received a scolding from her stern father. Dad also controlled her studies very strictly, not allowing her to be lazy or to skip classes, and Kathy left university as a qualified English interpreter. Now, Kathy thought, "Can I relax and live my life?" But it turned out that her father's next plan was to marry her off. This was the last straw in the girl's cup of patience, and she and her father had a big fight. Frank knew his daughter's stubborn nature, so he didn't put it off, and the next day he invited the Sam family over for a dinner party. The boy was fashionably and beautifully dressed and chattered away, bragging about how he had recently had a great vacation in the islands, surfed, and participated in a beer festival. His father nodded approvingly, nodding his head in agreement. He was so fat, he could barely fit in his chair. Frank, for his part, praised Kathy in every way, and told him how smart she was, that she had recently graduated with honors and was the best in her class. Then he went on to the main point. Yes, our children have grown up. It's time to marry them. What do you think of that, gentlemen? I think they'd make a great couple. Both young, handsome, smart, just a looker. Sam's father said, fixing his greasy little eyes on Kathy and answering. She seems to be a nice daughter-in-law, a decent family. I think she'll do. What do you think, Sam? Do you like it? The girl erupted in indignation. She was traded like a horse in a circus. It was unheard of. Sam was already mentally imagining how he would roll with this beautiful and such a stubborn girl who was always twisting her nose and refused to get acquainted with him, and smiled carnivorously. I like it very much. Let's consider it a tryst. When are we going to have the wedding? Kathy asked quietly and angrily. My opinion, I take it, is of no interest to anyone. Right, Daddy? He stepped painfully on her foot under the table and answered aloud as gently as possible. Honey, I wish you nothing but happiness. Sam is a great match. He will be a good husband for you, and I will be calm about your future. Kathy jumped up like scalded from the table and ran to her room. My father shouted menacingly. Kathy, where are you going? Go back to your guests immediately. It's not nice. The girl defiantly replied. Something's got a headache. It must be from happiness. Kathy's father hastened to make amends for the unpleasant scene. You'll have to excuse her. She's still young. She's too sharp. Sam's father muttered. Never mind. When she comes to our house, we'll teach her some manners. Right, son? He just chuckled, imagining their first wedding night. He had long dreamed of possessing Xenia, tried to get acquainted with her, but she flatly refused. And now, such luck. Their parents had decided to marry them themselves. For Sam, it was just an exciting adventure. Kathy was angry, called her best friend Nancy, and swallowing her tears, began to tell her grief. Can you imagine? He's asking me for that pompous peacock, Sam. I can't stand him. All he does is go clubbing and spend his father's money. I don't need such a husband. But my father is deaf and blind. He only sees their money in front of him. Yesterday he invited those turkeys over for dinner. I could hardly stand it. Sam looked at me like that. I don't want to marry him. It's wild. It's medieval. What am I going to do, Nancy? You've got to run away from home, for God's sake. A friend has always been distinguished by unconventional thinking and creative ideas, and immediately jokingly gave out, and you go and spite your father with a tramp. Maybe then he will leave you alone. That'll be hilarious. Kathy was stunned. What tramp? Where am I going to get one? Nancy laughed. There are not enough of them on the street. Just make a deal with anyone to play along, that's all. Give him some money and we'll put on a show. We'll call all the guys from the company, take pictures. Come on, I'm kidding. Don't be offended. It's just a crazy idea. You know me. And Kathy suddenly caught fire. You know, it's not dope at all. I'm going to tell my father that I'm not getting married to his candidate because I'm already engaged. Would that help? I don't know how to get through to him. I'm gonna go look for a fiancé right now. Now Kathy no longer cried, but laughed, picturing the picture vividly. Quickly she got dressed, ran out through the backyard to the street, so her father wouldn't notice, and wandered around the city, looking for a suitable candidate. Never before had she considered those poor vagrants begging by the subway or rummaging through garbage cans, but now she had to look closer. But the more Kathy looked at the drunken, wrinkled faces and the unpleasant stench of homelessness, the quicker her fervor waned. She couldn't imagine such a person anywhere near her, even if it was just for fun. Suddenly, near the square, she saw a young, jolly guy in a cap and worn-out jeans. He was playing unpretentious tunes on his guitar, and a curly-haired dog was dancing on his hind legs to the amusement of the audience. Next to the table was a glass, where passers-by who were moved by the concert threw money. I must say the guy was a success. Some even applauded. Despite his obviously vagrant lifestyle, the guy did not look like a low-life alcoholic, and his clothes, though very old and tattered in places, were clean. There he is, my perfect match. Found it, thought Kathy. She walked up to the tramp, smiled charmingly, and put a large bill in the glass. The guy whistled when he saw the generous gift, winked back at her, and suddenly sang a song about a beautiful dream girl. Passers-by immediately stared at Kathy, who blushed involuntarily, and the guy put down his guitar and introduced himself. "Thank you, sweet princess. You really are so beautiful. I've only seen them in magazines. I'm James, and this is my faithful friend Rex. Give me your paw and say hello." The dog did indeed immediately extend his paw to Kathy, who laughed and patted him back. "How funny. I'm Kathy. You know, James, I didn't just come up to you. I have something to do with you. It's very special. Can you play the part of my fiancé for one evening? I'll pay you well." The guy stared dumbfoundedly at the stranger. "Wow, I've never been proposed to before, and I've never been proposed to by such beauties. Come on, tell me, what do I have to do? I was wondering." The girl blushed again and began to explain incoherently. "You see, my father has been overprotecting and controlling me since I was a child. He just doesn't let me breathe. And now he's found me a fiancé, also a rich and feisty rich guy. And I cannot stand it. That just pisses me off. How can I marry someone I don't love? So I want to piss off my father. I'll rent a restaurant, invite friends and photographers, and you'll come there. You'll say you're my fiancé, propose to me in front of everyone, as if we'll get engaged soon. The ring I myself will buy, and about the appearance do not worry. Put on some rags unattractive. Ugh. Then the wedding with the big man will be ruined for sure, and my father will leave me alone. Do we have a deal?" James smiled cheerfully. "It's easy, I agree. I even understand you. If there is no love, why torture yourself? And in general, I sympathize with you. You have money, but no freedom. I have, on the contrary, a lot of this freedom, but nowhere to live and not on what. That's the paradox. Tell me when and where to go. I won't let you down. Don't doubt it." Kathy was suddenly worried. "Oh, where would I look for you? You're here and there, aren't you? I'm sure you don't have a phone." James laughed. "There really is no phone. And I live at the janitor's in the back, near the sunflower store. The owner of the store took me in. There's a couch and bedding. And there is a bed for Rex. And instead of paying my rent, I sweep his yards at dawn, when no one is looking. You can find me there if you need me. So long, bride. It's time for Rex and me. Goodbye." Kathy rubbed her hands together, immediately called Nancy, told her everything, and the pair of them began the elaborate preparations. They booked a banquet at a high-end restaurant, invited close friends, acquaintances, and photographers. Kathy bought herself a gorgeous dress with a huge neckline in the back and stiletto shoes. On the eve of the event, she gave her fiancé an exquisite ring and a red case. And so it began. All the guests were there, and the photographers had their ears open. When James arrived at the restaurant, they didn't let him in right away. An old worn jacket, knee-hole pants, and tattered galoshes embarrassed the guards, but Kathy personally gave the okay for the young man to be let in. James gasped when he saw his bride in her evening gown and exquisite hair, and he walked up to her, casually embraced her in front of everyone, so dashing and masterful, and whispered, "You certainly look like a goddess in that outfit. I'm blown away. But honestly, in jeans and a windbreaker, you're real." Then he took a scarlet box out of his pocket, got down on one knee as was his custom, and gave such a heartfelt speech that even Nancy, who had known about the play from the beginning, gaped at it. It was so believable. James, looking into Kathy's eyes, said, "My beloved, tender, sweetest, and most beautiful, marry me. I promise to take care of you, to carry you in my arms, and not to let anyone hurt you. Do you agree?" Kathy replied, "Yes, I agree." And the guy put a ring on her finger. This exciting moment was immediately snapped by photographers. In spite of the dumbfounded and astonished faces of the guests, there was a celebration, a feast and dancing till you drop. Why should the good go to waste? The tables were piled high with exquisite and expensive treats. Kathy and James had a blast, and they danced along to the fiery music. The guy was so easy to be with, so free and easy to be yourself. Toward the end of the evening, Kathy became very anxious. "James, I'm so scared. I can imagine what a scandal it would be. My father will kill me." The guy said, "Kathy, tell me, aren't you tired of living like a puppet at your father's behest? You're living someone else's life, not your own. Spit on the wealth, get out of the house, start your life from scratch, and finally become yourself. Take a risk. You're a cool girl. I like you a lot, but I feel sorry for you. Will I see you again? I'd love to show you a different, free life that you know nothing about." The girl thought hard about what James had said. And really, no one had ever asked her what she wanted. Had they? What did she want to be? How to live? Her influential father had always decided everything for her. Maybe it was time to change everything. If not now, when? Kathy awoke this morning to her father's frantic screaming over her ear. Her head ached from last night's champagne, and her legs were humming from dancing. Frank shook the morning edition of the local paper over her head and shouted, "What is this? What engagement? And who's that bum next to you? Are you out of your mind? Try to explain. Get up now." Kathy was shaken up inside. Sleep vanished like a lightning bolt. The newspapermen were quick. "You couldn't tell," she replied. "This, Daddy, is my engagement, and my fiance's name is James. So now getting married to Sam is out of the question, which I'm very happy about. And I'll marry that tramp if I have to, but not Sam, understand? And if you push me, I'll leave the house altogether." Frank was furious. He tore the poor paper into little pieces and continued to rage. "Do you realize what you've done, silly girl? Now the whole town will be buzzing with the news that the daughter of a famous surgeon is marrying a bum. You're not Sam. You've ruined my whole reputation. You bitch. You say you're going to leave home. Go back to your bum and roll away. Live on your bread. You won't get a cent from me, understand? You'll get over it. You'll realize how much your father did for you." The man jumped out of his daughter's room in anger, and his phone was already bursting with calls from Sam's father. A serious conversation was brewing, because almost everything was ready for the wedding, and even distinguished guests were invited. And then this. Kathy cried and packed her suitcase, taking only the essentials. She decided to sell her grandmother's jewelry, which she had left her as a keepsake, so she wouldn't have to take money from her father, and he blocked her bank cards right away. Then the girl rented an apartment in the suburbs and moved there. She did not know what to do next. At the new place, in a modest apartment, Kathy was wild and unaccustomed, and she decided to visit James. She wanted to tell someone about everything. These new changes in life were very sudden and abrupt, and greatly frightened the girl. He was genuinely pleased with her. "Oh, hello, bride. Rex, say hello. Would you like some tea? Why so sour?" Kathy almost cried. "I left home, and I had a big fight with my father. He yelled at me so much. He blocked all my cards, told me I'd be crawling back soon. And I'm kind of glad, but I'm so wild it's all. I do not know how to live independently, accustomed to obey my father and do what he says. Where to start? What do I do? I'm like a fish that was thrown on the shore, gulping for air and wondering if I'll survive or not." James immediately made a decision. "You need some time first to come to your senses, to adapt. Let's take the next week. Don't think about anything, just live. And I'll show you everything I know about freedom. And then you can decide what you want to do." All right then. What do we need? Matches, a blanket, bread, and potatoes. That's it. Oh, and sausages and my guitar. And some tea in a thermos. That's it. Quickly get ready and follow me. A dumbfounded Kathy asked. Where? I don't understand. James winked at her. Don't worry, bride, I won't hurt you. I'll show you such beauty that all your jewelry will fade. Well, cheer up. So they went on a hike. At first they hitchhiked, and James entertained the driver with happy songs instead of money. Then they walked for a long time along winding paths outside the city into the woods. Finally, when it was getting dark outside, James exclaimed, That's it, we're here. Come here, Kathy. Look at the view from up there. What a beautiful sunset. What nature. There's a stream with spring water nearby, and a lake. This is my favorite place. I used to come here often as a child. Nature heals and soothes. It infuses you with the energy of trees. The free wind. Can you smell freedom? Kathy really looked up at the vast, dark sky and feathery clouds, the huge red sun that was slowly sinking below the horizon, the swaying mighty treetops, and couldn't get enough of it. How wonderful it was. Why hadn't she noticed such simple things before? After all, it wasn't far from the city, and she'd never even been here. Meanwhile, James built a fire and began to roast bread and sausages on ordinary sticks cut from trees, and then potatoes in the coals. The girl ate the treat in the fresh air and wondered how delicious it was. So simple and so delicious. And then James stirred the embers. They crackled and flared, and the boy sang beautiful, intimate songs to her. James had a very pleasant timbre to his voice, and Kathy listened to him. She had never, like an ordinary camper, rested like this, never eaten crusty bread and tasty baked potatoes, never sat so heartily by the fire, where you could be yourself, sing along to the beat, and think about nothing, just enjoy the moment. For a whole week, Kathy and James just walked hand in hand through the park, ate delicious vanilla ice cream, rode the carousel, and had fun. They talked a lot. James talked about his miserable fate. Mom put me in an orphanage when I was 3 years old. Just like that, she took me by the hand, put me on the porch, and said, Farewell, son. You'll be better off here. Forgive me, I can't raise you. She turned around and left. I remember how I cried and screamed when the nannies took me to the orphanage, and I called for Mommy. I believed that she would come to her senses and come back for me. But how could a mother forget her own son? It turns out she can. When I was a child, I was angry and hated her for a long time, and then I forgave her. After all, I don't know what happened to her, do I? Why did she do what she did? So I have no right to judge her. The orphanage was hell. Of course. I fought and dug my teeth out for a place in the sun. When I became a teenager, I realized that if I stayed there any longer, I was finished. After all, most of the guys were already drinking heavily and smoking, and not just cigarettes. So I ran away for good. I've been wandering around the world ever since. I've been sheltered here and there. I even lived in a gypsy camp for a month. They taught me how to sing and gave me a guitar. I take life easily and take it as it is. A man does not really need much in life. A crust of bread and a glass of water. There's a good saying, what does it matter how old your sneakers are, as long as you wear them to walk around Paris? Kathy talked about herself. It was just the opposite for me. My mother died very early when I was 7 years old, and then my father raised me alone. He loved me very much, even too much. He constantly decided everything for me. I lived as if in a golden cage. It was like I had everything. And you could buy everything, but you were not allowed to do anything yourself. Since childhood, I loved haircuts. I myself have mastered a few hairstyles. Even friends at parties I dyed and styled their hair. I really like it, to my liking. But as soon as I mentioned it to my father, I immediately heard, "Don't make it up. What's a hairdresser? You'll go to the most prestigious university, choose the department yourself, but better go to the interpreter. You know German very well, right?" That's what I call a decent profession. And I became a translator, and I studied brilliantly. And I was the first in my class, and I was set as an example for everyone. But no one understood that I didn't dream of becoming an interpreter or working in a school. And so on with everything. James suddenly said, "You know, you're the first person in my life with whom I want to try to change, to start living differently. And let's get out of here. For good. To another city where no one knows us. And start a new life from scratch." Kathy babbled frightenedly. "I don't know. Where are we going to live? I can't sleep here and there. Of course I have my grandmother's money. I sold her jewelry, but I'm afraid it won't last long." James hastened to reassure her. "Kathy, I'm not a fool to suggest that such a lovely girl should lead a wandering life. That's not what I wanted to tell you. I really like you. No, you don't. I love you, and you make me want to be different. Go away, get a job, live together, have kids, you know. You've changed me in just a couple of weeks. I don't want to wander anymore, and I don't want to lose you." The girl blushed, and blushing at these words, she replied, "I fell in love with you too. Believe me, from the first minute I saw you and Rex in that square. You're different too. You don't care if I'm rich, or who my father is, or what people think. You saw me as a person, my essence, my soul, and that's priceless. And I like that in you. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go tomorrow, before my father comes to his senses and starts looking for me. You can't hide from him in this town. He'll find me everywhere. For some reason I believe you, even though I know very little, and I'm ready to risk and go on my own independent voyage together with you. We'll rent an apartment, I'll take a hairdressing course, you'll find a job, and we'll live as we want. No one can tell us." James determinedly drew Kathy to him and kissed her passionately on the lips. The girl literally had the ground beneath her feet, and millions of butterflies fluttered in her stomach. She had certainly never felt such emotions for anyone before. 6 months passed. Frank has since lost peace and sleep. After the deafening scandal of the wedding cancellation, he was looked down upon and often whispered behind his back that his daughter was a blissful fool, and instead of marrying a rich bridegroom, she ran off with some street tramp. What a shame. The surgeon hated that tramp, though he had never seen him. How dare he take away his dearest treasure, his little girl? And Kathy, what was she missing? Why did she do such a thing? She had the best of everything, not like all the rest. Live happily ever after. Why did she decide to run away with that beggar? What was in her head? But no matter how angry Frank was at his daughter for her antics, he still missed her desperately. For all the years since his wife's death, he had never been able to love anyone else, had never let anyone into his heart. And so he had given the whole avalanche of feelings exactly to his beloved daughter. Yes, maybe he was overly shaking her, patronizing her, worrying about her, controlling her. But it was only out of sheer love, out of the best of intentions. And now, without Kathy, the house was completely deserted. The man wandered in the evenings through the rooms, drinking bitter coffee, and often cried secretly, sitting on his daughter's bed and holding in his hands her silk pajamas with funny bears, thrown in a hurry. Frank hadn't really intended to drive his daughter out of the house. He'd only wanted to teach her a lesson. He thought that she would get over it. She would be in poverty, and then she would come back home and appreciate her father and thank him. And that's how it turned out. Half a year has passed, and not a word from Kathy. Not a phone call, not a letter. His father's heart blowed with worry, wondering how his little girl was doing. What was the matter with her? The man tore off her phone, but all he heard in response was, "The subscriber is temporarily unavailable." Finally, the surgeon couldn't take it anymore and hired a private investigator to track down Kathy. He wanted to go and beat the crap out of that bum for taking his daughter, and to bring Kathy home, right or wrong. After all, life without her, as it turned out, had no meaning. A week later, he received Kathy's address at work, and now she lived in another city. The man was shocked. It meant his daughter really had married that bum. My God, we had to save our little girl right away. Maybe she is in need, malnourished. Frank became even more angry at the tramp and drove with a great desire to just plain kill him. Until this James showed up in Kathy's life, everything had been wonderful. The surgeon had no trouble getting to the right address, an ordinary high-rise, a nice quiet neighborhood, not like a slum. Took the elevator and determinedly pressed the doorbell. He was opened by the same bum, James, only he didn't look like a hobo at all now. He was fashionably trimmed, well-dressed, and quite well-fed. Not only that, his face was painfully familiar, but Frank was unstoppable, and he came at the guy with almost no more than a fist. You bastard. It's all your fault. Where's my daughter? Where did you take her? Confess. Why did you come into our lives? Kathy, my girl, I've come for you. Get ready at once. James shook the surgeon and calmly answered, Good day to you too, Daddy. Let's not make a row, but let's calm down and go to the apartment. The daughter jumped out at the noise and was dumbfounded. Dad, how are you here? Why did you come? Why are you shouting? I'm fine. It was only in the apartment, in daylight, that the surgeon got a good look at the guy's face, and his jaw dropped. He was an exact copy of a man the surgeon had known in his youth. Frank began to whisper, James Wright, what was your father's name? What was your mother's name? And why were you on the street? The surprised guy replied, Dad's name was Andrew, and he was how shall I put it gently, a gangster. He was killed when I was almost 3 years old, in some shootout. And Molly's mom, she left me at the orphanage. Why, I don't know. That question still haunts me to this day. I barely survived. I ran away when I was 15. I didn't have a place to live, so I wandered around the world. Only when I met your Kathy by chance I fell in love with her so much that I decided to start my life over again. Now I'm not homeless. I work at a construction site. I'll finish night school and go back to school. I make good money. We have enough. The surgeon stared at him in amazement, then suddenly dropped to his knees and began to whisper, I'm sorry, James, but I know why your mother left you and how your father died. You look just like him. You look just like him. Forgive me if you can. I am to blame for your fate. I am such a wretch. It's been so many years, and I do not even think that I broke a man's life. James and Kathy understood nothing. The girl thought her father was having a nervous breakdown. She was very frightened and ran up to her father. Dad, get up. What are you doing? What are you talking about? Here, drink this. I gave you some sedative drops. Tell me everything in order. Did you really know Father James? I never would have guessed that. The man drank a sedative in one gulp, caught his breath, and began to talk. It was such a long time ago. Those were troubled times, territorial redistribution, and banditry was flourishing. I was already the head of the surgical department. A lot of people in town knew me. And then one day a criminal, Andrew, was brought straight to my house. He was seriously wounded, dying. I told him right away that there was no chance of saving him, especially at home. But he was so begging to be saved. So I tried. I pulled out the bullets, but the bleeding still hadn't stopped. Andrew didn't have much time to live. I honestly told him that. Then he whispered in my ear, overcome with pain. Listen, doctor, I have a case. I have a dacha, plot number 310. It has long been abandoned. Well, there's a lot of money in a black briefcase under the roof of the shed. Where from? Don't ask. You take some for your trouble, and take the rest to this address. My wife and son are there. They'll be in trouble without me. Give them the rest, please. I can't ask my brothers to do that. I know they'll take it all for themselves, but you're an honest man, you won't let me down. Remember, it's my last will. And Andrew died in my arms. His brothers were very unhappy that I hadn't saved their friend. They threatened me, but then they cooled down and took the body with them. I did not really believe Andrew's dying words at first. I thought he was delirious. But my curiosity got the better of me. So I went to the same daksha. And what do you think? There I really found a briefcase full of money. And that's when the devil got me. Greed took over. I took everything. And I didn't take anything to Andrew's wife. I knew that no one but me knew about the money. I opened my own clinic, bought expensive equipment, and became rich. Bought a mansion, got married. Then Kathy was born. And everything went on, family, work. Then my wife died, and I began to raise my daughter alone. And now, many years later, when I saw James, I realized what I had done. Had I done the right thing and given the money to Andrew's wife, things would have turned out differently for you, James. You wouldn't have been poor. You would have started a new life, and your mother wouldn't have had to put you in an orphanage. Don't hold it against your mother. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. I've been living large and fat, and you've been suffering in the orphanage and malnourished. I'm the last bastard. You shouldn't have done that. It wasn't human. Forgive me, boy, if you can. Frank was terribly ashamed. So he sat down on the couch, covered his face with his hands, and sobbed silently. James hadn't expected to hear that from his stern father-in-law. He didn't know how to react, just blinked and remained silent, digesting what he'd heard. Kathy was overwhelmed with mixed feelings. On the one hand, he felt madly sorry for James, for his fate was really broken. He had no childhood, and everything was someone else's fault. And on the other hand, he felt sorry for his father. When he was crying now, he repented, confessed his mistake, realized everything, though it was late. The girl tried to smooth things over somehow and said, "You know what? Let's all calm down and have some tea. Daddy, you go in the kitchen. I'll make your favorite with bergamot. Don't call me back. Daddy, I'm not going. Look, I'm perfectly happy here with James. I've become myself. Yes, even if I am not a cool translator, but an ordinary hairdresser, even if we do not live in a cool mansion, but in an ordinary rented apartment, and we eat not cream cheese for breakfast, but ordinary oatmeal, but I have much more. A favorite job that I love, a husband I love. I don't have to conform to anyone. I don't have to adjust to anyone. I am me, and I don't need more than that." Frank stared at his daughter in amazement. Her eyes lit up. She looked so beautiful, so fondly at James, and it was obvious that she was really happy. He even felt a little hurt. Was it possible that he had tried all these years for nothing? He had worked for success, for fame, to give his daughter a brilliant education, if she didn't need it all. He suddenly realized that in this mad race, he had not lived at all. He was afraid of missing the deadline, of not making enough money, and life was passing him by, waving at him. Maybe he should have stopped, breathed a little, looked around, and just lived, enjoying each day, enjoying the simple things, little things as his daughter did. Maybe she was right. James suddenly said quietly, "I don't hold it against you, Frank, honestly. I don't think that blood money from gangsters would have made me and my mother happy. It would have saved the family. No, it's all about the man himself. No matter how hard it is, isn't every mother going to take her child by the hand and take her to an orphanage? Of course not. You had to fight, learn to survive, go to work. And the mother gave up, broke down. She got confused. Or something else. I don't know. In any case, you can't undo the past, no matter how much you want to. Yes, I went through a lot, but you know, I tried not to lose heart anyway, to enjoy a ray of sunshine, a fresh bun, a free wind and freedom. But when I met Kathy, something in my mind changed. I suddenly didn't want to live as a vagabond. It was just unbearable to part with her. I realized that this was the person I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, to love her, to cherish and care for her. You should be proud of your daughter because she was not spoiled by money and wealth, and she did not become one of those glamorous, empty girls who only think about salons and resorts, but she remained herself and kept her soul. You don't see that very often now. The world has gone rotten. People have become insane in the pursuit of fame and money. They have stopped appreciating what the Lord God gives them. It's scary. And Kathy and I continue to enjoy each other every day. In every little thing, even the ordinary things, you can find a positive. It's sunny and warm outside. Great. We definitely go for a walk with Rex in the park, basking in the caressing rays. It's raining and cold. No problem either. We make hot chocolate and sit, wrapped up in a warm rug, watching a heartwarming movie. Bad weather is raging outside, but we are so cozy and warm. And this, too, is a little happiness. Our world and Kathy's are the same, you know. Frank answered quietly. It seems that only now I'm beginning to understand it. I see that my daughter is happy. She lives modestly and simply, and she's happy. What a paradox. I only now realize what a mistake I almost made if I had given Kathy in marriage to Sam against her will. And at the time I thought I was doing everything right, and that if my daughter was provided for, she would automatically be happy. You're right, James. I did become obsessed with money. My career, my soul, my interests, my life. Even my favorite work has ceased to please me. While in my youth I used to take up every case with such fervor, enthusiasm, and wanted to save a man's life sincerely. Even now, I seem to do everything correctly. Everything is brought to automatism, but I am bogged down in papers, reports, and all this routine, while my vocation is a surgeon, no matter how hard it is. My darlings, don't drive me away. It's gotten so lonely in the big house without you, daughter. So dreary. What have I got all this money for all by myself? What to do with it? What shall I do with it? And another thing, James, I want to make it up to you. Any wish you want, I promise to fulfill. Think about it. The guy immediately responded, There's nothing to think about. Help me find my mother. I want to know whether she is alive or not. What is wrong with her? Maybe she needs help. And just see her, look her in the eyes, talk to her, ask her why she did what she did. This question has tormented me since childhood, and I want to find an answer to it. Frank promised. Okay, James, I heard you. We'll find your mom, don't worry. I'll bring in the best specialists. You know, when I found out that my only and beloved daughter was secretly engaged to some tramp off the street, I wanted to tear you into 1,000 pieces. It's such a shame. And then she ran away. She left no address, nothing. I was angry. I was furious. I thought she was going to be poor and broke, and then she'd come running back. But no, days, weeks, and months passed, and still no daughter. I thought I was going crazy. Honestly, I forgave her long ago, forgot all the hard feelings, just wanted her to come home. I even drove to you today with one thought, to deal with you. It seemed to me that you, James, were the cause of all the trouble. And when I saw you, I was just dumbfounded. I remembered it all at once. I swear I won't interfere with your happiness anymore. I just want to be near you, to come and visit you, to talk to you. Don't deny your father such a little thing. They talked for a long time, had supper, and drank tea. Then James did funny tricks with Rex and sang songs with his guitar. And Frank caught himself thinking how good and comfortable he felt here. Everything simple, without any tinsel or show-offs. From the first glance, they could see that Kathy and James had a real understanding and feelings. They looked at each other so much. The surgeon realized that one could only dream of such a son-in-law. He would never hurt, betray his daughter. As promised, Frank had made all his connections and found Mother James, though it was not easy. She had lived in a convent for many years and was an ordinary novice. She had been working up a sweat and praying day and night. At first, the woman flatly refused to talk to both the private detective and the surgeon, refused to make any contact. And then James himself went to see her at the monastery. The elderly Mother Superior, Mother Julia, came out to him. She listened carefully to the boy, then said, Molly has lived at the convent for 10 years. They found her on the street. She was drunk and beaten, in a very bad condition, and I don't know why they brought her here to us. It must have been God's will. We don't keep people here by force, you understand. It's everyone's personal choice. When Molly came to her senses, we fixed her up, but she flatly refused to leave, saying she couldn't. She would disappear on the street. So she stayed here. She is a reserved person. She did not tell us much about herself, but she works to her heart's content, doesn't spare herself, and frantically prays. Wait here. I'll try to talk to her. But if she refuses to see you, alas, I can't help her. I won't force her. James sat, worried, so quiet, so peaceful within the walls of the monastery. Suddenly, the heavy oak door creaked open, and a thin, tall woman in a black robe and a scarf tied on her forehead appeared on the threshold. The boy looked into her eyes, the same cornflower ones with the squint he remembered well from his childhood, and said softly, "Hello, Mother. It's me, James, your son." The woman's eyes immediately moistened, and she fell to her knees and began to cross and wail. "James, my son, I recognized you. Forgive me, my darling, my darling. My sin is a great, indelible one. It's my fault for putting you in an orphanage. I abandoned my own child to strangers. I'm not a mother, a cuckoo. There's no forgiveness for me. I will bear this cross to the end." She put her arms around his legs and kissed them frantically. James immediately rushed to his mother, lifted her from his lap, and held her close to him. It was finally happening. When he felt his mother's warmth, felt her heart beating frantically, breathed in the smell of incense, all resentment, all childish sorrow, all anger evaporated and vanished at once. He just held her there, in his arms, and cried for a long time. And with each tear all the bad, all the negativity from his wounded soul was gone. Then they sat down on a high wooden bench and had a heart-to-heart talk. James asked, "Tell me, Mother, what happened then? How did it happen that you put me in an orphanage? I vaguely remember that you loved me, how you put me to bed, how you took me for walks. What happened?" The woman sighed. "When your father died, it was a bad time. Your daddy was a bandit, but he took care of his family. He didn't let anybody hurt him, and he provided us with everything we needed. But after he died, a month later some people came and said that Andrew owed them a huge amount of money and that I had to pay it immediately or they would kill us. They kicked us out of the apartment. They took it away for debts. That's how I ended up with you, little one, on the street. At first I lived here and there with acquaintances. But you know, your father's acquaintances are also very special people. I started drinking a lot, and I had no idea what to do with you. So I broke down and took you to the orphanage myself. I'm sorry, son. I remember that day as I do now, how poor you were crying, screaming and holding out your hands to me. It seemed to me then that I was saving you, and that you would be better off in an orphanage than wandering with me, a good-for-nothing, in strange other people's apartments. But when I was all alone, I thought I was going crazy. Your screaming and crying eyes were in my ears all those years. I was desperately bored, cursing myself, and drinking like hell. I had gone down the drain, had hit rock bottom. I couldn't remember my name. I didn't care what I looked like or what I wore. I didn't even look like a woman anymore. I was just frantically looking for a drink to forget myself. When I woke up in the convent, I thought I had finally disappeared and was in heaven, in God's judgment. They helped me a lot here, healed me, and I refused to leave. I stayed here. I was afraid of that evil world. I knew I was weak and would snap again. I've been living here ever since, working and praying day and night for you, my son. I haven't forgotten you for a minute. My conscience has always burned with a burning iron, branding a bastard inside me. I hate myself for what I did. James, forgive me if you can. The guy kept wiping away his tears with the back of his hand and talking. Mom, I forgave you a long time ago, honestly. Before, as a child, when I was beaten by other children, when I was hungry and ran away, I did not hide it. I was angry and cried. I did not understand why you did that. Why did I have to go through all this? And I was desperately jealous of the kids at home who had a home, a family, and loving parents. At 15, I finally ran away from the orphanage, couldn't stay there any longer, and never went back. I wandered around, traveled around a lot of cities, saw all kinds of people, and I even fell in love with that kind of freedom, the free life. I don't know who sang in our family, but the gypsies taught me how to play the guitar and sing songs. So I wandered around with my faithful dog Rex, earning my bread with my songs. And then I met this wonderful girl, Kathy, and she totally changed me. We moved to another city, rented an apartment. I'm working at a construction site now as a foreman. Kathy is a hairdresser. We got married. We hope to have babies soon too. I'm glad I found you, Mommy, that we saw each other. I haven't been mad at you for a long time. I understand everything. If you want, you can live with us, Kathy, and I would be only too happy. I wish I could take care of you, love you, make up for all the things you missed out on. But Molly shook her head. No, son, I'm not leaving here. This is my place, my cross. This is where my soul has found salvation. I am very glad that you have grown to be such a wonderful man, that you have not become embittered, and that you have not gone down the wrong path, as I did, and got married. I wish you and your wife nothing but happiness, and I will pray earnestly that God will send you children. But I don't want to go back. I have done too many sins in my life. I can't wash them away till I'm dead. Farewell, my son. Go with God. Let me hug you one more time to say goodbye. Know that I love you too, and have never forgotten you. Molly crossed her son goodbye and gave him her personal cross with the words, "Let him keep and protect you from all sorrows and misfortunes. Forgive me, dear one, for everything." James left, and Molly fell back on her knees in front of the images, beating her forehead and asking God's forgiveness for her sins, and giving thanks for this unexpected meeting with her son. The boy went out of the monastery, crossed himself, looking back at the golden domes, and felt an incredible relief in his soul, as if a huge stone had been removed. Even breathing seemed to become easier. He needed and important to him exactly those words, said his mother, that she loved him and never forgot. So what if she was like that? Everyone has the right to choose his own way. You can't judge her for that. The important thing was that he now knew where she was, that she was all right, and that she was well looked after. Life went on as usual. James and Kathy lived soul to soul, and Dad visited them often now. Frank had changed completely, or rather his own daughter had changed him. He bought them a spacious apartment, and he sold his clinic, donated all the money to charity, helped orphanages and foundations in the city that help cure children with serious illnesses. He did not regret his action and did what he thought was right. He himself took a job as an ordinary surgeon in the city hospital, and in his spare time he spent with his daughter and son-in-law, secretly dreaming of grandchildren. He and James went fishing together. It turned out to be so wonderful, cooking fish soup over a campfire and watching the sunrise with the morning bite. And soon, at his new job, Frank met a nice woman, a nurse on duty, Miranda. She was very ordinary looking, plump, short, with a nice and open face. But since some time the man was not interested in her appearance, he fell in love with her soul, because Miranda was such a kind and good person that it was impossible not to love her. They began to meet and then live together. He introduced Miranda to his daughter and son-in-law. They all quickly found a common language and often spent time together. They lived simply like everyone else, but what a happiness it was to wake up, to smell something inexpressibly delicious, and to understand that you are not alone. Miranda's favorite Miranda is bustling around in the kitchen making them breakfast, or falling asleep snuggled up against the dearest person in the world. These moments are much more important and expensive than any money, fame, and honor, because they fill the soul and life with real meaning.